In a prestigious high school, Takane is the definition of perfection. She dominates in academics, outshines in sports, and even secured the position of student council president, an impressive feat considering she's only a freshman. She's admired by everyone, respected by teachers, and practically untouchable. To put it simply, Takane is a goddess among students, and Koshi is the complete opposite. He's just below average. His grades are a mess, his presence is barely acknowledged, and he's practically a background character in his own school life. Yet despite the overwhelming gap between them, Koshi can't help but admire Takane from afar. They've gone to the same school since childhood, and in all that time, she's always been leagues above him. Naturally, she's never had a reason to notice him. At least, that's what he thinks. As Koshi drags himself to his usual lunch spot, lost in self-deprecating thoughts, he fails to notice the way Takane's gaze lingers on him before she walks off in another direction. He has no idea that in the near future, their relationship will change forever. And it all starts with lunch. Koshi's usual hideout is a forgotten sports supply room, a place where no one bothers him. As he eats his lunch, he checks his phone to see today's agenda and immediately regrets it. Today is the day they will be receiving their math grades, and he's fully expecting another disaster. But just as he's about to wallow in despair, the door creaks open. Koshi tenses as he realizes someone other than him is here. Quickly, he ducks behind a stack of boxes, peering out cautiously. His breath catches when he sees Takane. Before he can even process why someone like her would be here, she casually begins to undress. Koshi spins around, pressing himself against the supplies. His mind races, willing himself not to peep at her to give her some privacy. But he finds his resolve breaking when he hears the soft rustle of fabric hitting the floor. Against his better judgment, his eyes betray him, and he sneaks a glance. As the lunch break ends, students shuffle back to class. Koshi takes his seat, still trying to process everything. The teacher starts handing back graded exams, and Koshi braces himself for the worst. But when he gets his test back, he is pleasantly surprised to see that he actually passed the exam. Then something even more shocking happens. When Takane gets her paper back, she doesn't get 100%. The class falls silent. Whispers ripple through the room. The Queen of Perfection got a 98. Koshi watches her closely, wondering what might have happened. But before he can react further, something strange happens. The air around him shifts. He then sees a strange butterfly fluttering to where a door appears out of nowhere, floating in space. Strange lines begin to move, rewinding. In an instant, Koshi is back to where he is about to receive his test score. Koshi walks up to receive his test paper, trying to convince himself that what he just experienced was nothing more than a strange dream. The idea of him passing on the first try is already unrealistic enough, so maybe he imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was stress, exhaustion, or just a weird case of déjà vu. But as his eyes scan the page, his stomach twists. The score in front of him is exactly the same as the one from his vision. When the teacher calls out Takane, Koshi looks up, remembering how she scored a 98. But this time, there's no reaction, no whispers, no murmurs of disbelief, because Takane has scored a perfect 100. At the end of class, Koshi realizes that every bizarre thing that happened today seems to revolve around one person, Takane. So he decides to confront her about her test score in the student council room. When he enters, he nervously mentions that he saw her score a 98. The moment he mentions it, the air in the room shifts. Her posture remains composed, but there's something different now. A coldness settles in her expression. Her presence, once inviting, now feels suffocating. His back hits the wall before he even realizes it, and Takane is standing too close. Takane tries to ponder when she put her guard down and concludes that Koshi must have seen her plot in the sports supply room. She backs Koshi into a wall as he tries to come up with excuses. Suddenly she smiles, telling him that nothing can be done at this point and they need to come up with a deal to keep her secret. Koshi's mind is filled with worry. He thinks that Takane might find a way to expel him. So when she hands him a cup of water, he accidentally drops it due to being so nervous. Luckily, Takane manages to prevent herself from getting wet. Koshi scrambles to wipe away the spilled water from the floor, and the moment she decides the time is right, she displays her ability. She then begins to undress, and Koshi is suddenly brought into the dark space where the butterfly appears. The strange door is back, and as the butterfly enters, he sees a room of clocks that suddenly begin to rewind. Then reality snaps back into place, and Takane is drenched. Koshi stares, his brain unable to process what just happened. Koshi barely has time to process everything that just happened before Takane begins explaining. With the same confidence she always carries, she reveals the name of her ability, Eternal V-Card Road. She states without hesitation that it allows her to rewind time whenever she removes her plot. Just moments ago, she had taken off her plot on purpose, ensuring she would get hit by the spilled water, improving her power before his very eyes. Her tone remains steady as she explains that whenever she activates her ability, the plot she removes ceases to exist. It's erased from reality itself, and the reason Koshi remembers is that he saw her plot back in the storage room. That alone makes him an exception. Koshi's mind spins, trying to keep up, but his focus keeps slipping. The sheer absurdity of what she's saying mixes with the overwhelming awkwardness of the situation, making it nearly impossible to process anything properly. His mind refuses to settle, and yet Takane carries on as if this is nothing out of the ordinary. She recounts the first time her ability manifested. It was during a sports festival in the 5th grade, a day when she was expected to win without question. But just before the race, the bento she ate had already gone bad, causing her stomach unbearable pain. She tried to push through it, but her body slowed against her will, and for the first time in her life, she failed to take first place. The frustration of losing, the humiliation of coming second, was too much to bear. And then, just when she thought the day couldn't get worse, she peed herself in front of everyone. Desperate to escape the shame, she rushed to change, slipping off her soaked plot without a second thought. And in that moment, the world shifted. Time reversed. Suddenly, she was holding the flag meant for first place. From that moment on, she understood. This ability existed to ensure she never lost. And now she knows he remembers things no one else can. Takane continues, seemingly unaware of his growing panic. She casually complains about the inconvenience of always having to carry spare plot, saying it's a hassle to constantly be prepared for emergencies. But now, she has a solution. Koshi, with his ability to remember events before the rewind, is the perfect candidate. He will become her closet. Koshi freezes. He feels that the offer is completely absurd since it sounds like she is making him her own servant. His mind screams that he needs to get out of here, but before he can take a step back, Takane moves first. She tells him that by becoming her closet, he will no longer be just another forgettable face. He will be someone special. He will matter. However, Koshi still refuses to cooperate and turns to leave. Koshi barely makes a step toward the door before Takane moves to block his path, and they end up falling to the floor. For a brief moment, he is frozen in shock, his mind scrambling to process what just happened. But she suddenly lets out a piercing scream. The sound echoes through the halls, loud enough to reach the ears of every student nearby. When the door bursts open, they are met with a scene that leaves little room for interpretation. Gasps and shouts fill the air as several students grab Koshi, yanking him away from Takane. The girls in the crowd immediately pull out their phones, calling the police. Realization crashes down on Koshi like a ton of bricks. He's being framed. His mind races, trying to find a way out, but everything is happening too fast. The crowd's judgment is swift, and before he knows it, officials are already arriving, ready to take him away. Just as he is about to be dragged out of the room, Takane finally speaks, her voice soft and almost teasing. She asks him if he wishes for none of this to have ever happened. Swallowing his pride, he turns to her and begs her to use her power. Takane smiles, a victorious gleam in her eyes. She has him exactly where she wants him. If he wants her to save him, he has to agree. He has to become her closet. With no other choice, Koshi slowly agrees. A strange, surreal space of floating clocks and shimmering light surrounds them once more, signaling the rewind. Takane, now free of the previous events, takes full advantage of her victory. She explains his new role, clearly enjoying his discomfort. She teases him, making light of the situation as if trapping him into servitude is nothing more than a game. For his first task as her closet, she gives him an order. He has to put new plot on her. Since the one she removed was erased from existence, she now needs a replacement. She playfully blames him for the inconvenience, reminding him that she had to remove it for his sake. When he hesitates, she wastes no time in reminding him of his position. Begrudgingly, he digs into her bag and pulls out a pair of pink frilly plot. His hands tremble as he approaches her, the reality of what he's about to do setting in. Despite the absurdity of the situation, he knows he can't refuse. Takane, watching his every move, notices something peculiar. Despite the fact that he had openly stared at her plot earlier in the day, he now keeps his eyes firmly shut. Ever since he had entered the student council room, even when she had purposely exposed herself, he had made an active effort to avert his gaze. She had been certain that he, like any other boy, would have wanted to take in every detail, but instead, he had tried to respect her modesty, even when she had given him no reason to. She casually mentions that he is a gentleman, like back then, hinting they have met before. But before Koshi can dwell on her words, she gives him a new order, putting on her plot. This time, she challenges him to do it with his eyes closed. Koshi can't help but relive the day he agreed to become Takane's closet. The memory clings to him, haunting even his dreams. When he wakes up in a cold sweat, there's a fleeting sense of relief as he realizes it was just a dream, only for that illusion to shatter the moment his phone buzzes with a message from Takane. It's a brief reminder of his duties, curt and casual, followed by a photo of herself. As he makes his way onto the school grounds, he spots Takane surrounded by admirers. Koshi watches from afar, the image of the Takane from yesterday clashing violently with the girl he sees now. He wonders if that version, the one who stripped in front of him without shame, who forced him into servitude, is the real Takane, and this version is merely a well-rehearsed act. Lost in thought, he's caught off guard when Takane appears beside him, greeting him as though they're the best of friends. Whispers ripple through the students as they wonder why Takane would spare even a second for someone so unremarkable. Without breaking her smile, she leans in close and whispers a command into his ear. He is to report to the student council room before homeroom begins. Following her instructions, Koshi quietly steps into the student council office. She seems amused by his discomfort and reassures him, claiming they are partners. Takane hands him a small bag, and as Koshi hesitantly reaches inside, his fingers brush against something soft and he pulls out one of her plot. With the same unbothered tone, she instructs him to carry the bag with him at all times. Those are the replacement plots she'll need right after using her ability. It's his responsibility to put them on her the moment she's done so she doesn't lose time preparing for another rewind. She moves to lift her skirt to demonstrate, but Koshi quickly intervenes, urging her to stop. She meets his resistance with a thinly veiled threat, reminding him of the incident she saved him from, an incident she could easily unsave him from if she felt like it. Left with no real alternative, Koshi reluctantly agrees to do what she asks. Then with surprising sincerity, she admits that even for her, showing her plot is embarrassing. But it's only Koshi who sees it. She's willing to endure it. For a split second, Koshi feels a flicker of warmth, but he knows better than to trust her sudden vulnerability. When he voices his suspicion, Takane doesn't even bother to deny it. She laughs and admits that, yes, she's being manipulative. It's simply how she operates. Sensing their conversation is wrapping up, Koshi turns to leave. Later that day during literature class, Koshi finds himself unable to concentrate. His thoughts drift back to Takane and the strange power she wields. He wonders how he's supposed to keep track of her ability and how often she uses it. Just as the teacher calls on Takane to recite a verse from the poem, she rises from her seat with effortless grace and begins her performance. Her voice flows smoothly, each word measured and clear, her cadence controlled with the practiced precision of someone used to being in the spotlight. Her classmates are immediately drawn in by her presence, hanging on her every word. By the time she finishes, the room is filled with soft gasps of admiration, and even the teacher gives a nod of approval. Koshi observes the scene, seemingly relieved that her performance requires no interference from him, at least that's what he assumes. But then a light gust of wind drifts in through the windows, and with it comes a strange shift in the air. The atmosphere grows oddly still and quiet, almost like the pause before a storm. Feeling the breeze will heighten her performance, she suddenly announces to Koshi that she will use her ability, which confuses Koshi since it looks like her performance is already flawless. And in that instant, a flash of light, followed by the faint image of a butterfly passing through a glimmering doorway, fills their vision. Time rewinds, and they are back in the classroom at the exact moment Takane is called upon to perform. This time, she stalls ever so slightly, feigning the need to clear her throat. She waits until the breeze filters in once more, then begins reciting the poem again. Her timing is impeccable. With the soft wind blowing through the room, her voice seems to transcend the present, creating an illusion that the entire classroom has been transported to a different time. The words no longer sound like a simple recitation, but feel like a living memory being relived by everyone present. The students become completely absorbed, as if witnessing the poem's first recital, not by the original poet, but by Takane herself. When the final words leave her lips, silence blankets the room before the students break into thunderous applause. Takane quietly sits back down in her seat, casting a triumphant glance toward Koshi. Her expression makes it clear, this wasn't about correcting a mistake, it was about surpassing perfection. Koshi feels the pressure mount. Takane throws a crumpled piece of paper at the back of his head to remind him of his responsibility. He glances around, unsure how to proceed in the middle of class. Deciding it is impossible, he decides to wait till it's their break to hand her some plot. Takane, sitting just a few feet behind, shifts in her chair so that her skirt hikes up ever so slightly, making it clear that she's applying pressure in her own silent way. Koshi watches her in horror, knowing that she's doing it on purpose to pressure him into putting her plot on as fast as he can. Takane, so as to give Koshi an excuse to bend down, points out that he dropped an eraser, despite his eraser being in his pencil case. Remembering the way Takane had easily manipulated the situation before and framed him when he failed to follow her orders, Koshi realizes he has no choice but to comply. The risk of defiance is too great. Quietly, he reaches into his desk's side compartment and pulls out the small bag she entrusted to him. With his nerves on edge, he makes his way toward Takane's desk, pretending to retrieve the eraser she claimed he dropped. It's positioned perfectly, right in front of her chair. As soon as he's finished, he returns to his seat quickly, suppressing his rapid breathing and trying to calm the rush of adrenaline pulsing through him. Koshi surveys the room, expecting someone to have noticed something suspicious, but everyone is either preoccupied with the teacher or their own notes. He exhales deeply, and a small smile escapes his lips. For a moment, he feels triumphant, satisfied that he completed the task without attracting attention. At the end of their class, the teacher announces he'll be returning some homework. Koshi breathes a sigh of relief as he manages to be an effective closet so far. He glances at Takane and realizes that she seems uncomfortable. Glancing between her legs, he sees that he hadn't pulled the plot on all the way. He debates whether she's even aware of the problem, but the teasing glint in her eyes confirms that she knows, and worse, she expects him to fix it. His thoughts spiral. If he leaves it as it is, the plot might slip off when she stands to collect her return homework. her pristine image would be shattered. In another scenario, she could easily twist the situation to blame him for doing something inappropriate, causing a repeat of before and ruining his future for good. He questions whether he should allow her to continue manipulating him like this. Just as he resolves not to intervene, Takane's name is called. Before she can even rise from her seat, Koshi is already on his feet, walking straight to the front of the class. He speaks quickly, apologizing to the teacher for mishearing his name. The teacher, slightly confused but not concerned, tells him to bring Takane's homework back to her desk since he's already there. Koshi returns to her desk, placing the workbooks down, embarrassed for letting Takane manipulate him again. Takane, sitting calmly and utterly satisfied, gives him a knowing smile and offers a playful thank you. He turns to leave, eager to create some distance and let his heart settle. But before he can take a step away, Takane casually lifts both her feet and locks them around his ankles, effectively trapping him in place. Without raising her voice, she instructs him to finish the job properly this time, her tone calm but commanding. Koshi freezes in place, his eyes darting nervously around the room to ensure no one is paying attention to them. Just as he manages to slide the plot into place with his leg, someone suddenly calls his name from across the room. The sudden contact makes Takane let out a quiet, unexpected sound. Koshi quickly turns back to her, confused, concerned he may have heard her, but she quickly averts her gaze, her cheeks tinted a faint pink and her demeanor far less composed than usual. Back in the student council room, she praises Koshi for completing his duties without getting caught and congratulates him on his successful first day as her closet. Koshi, still tense from everything that happened, admits that he nearly passed out from the stress. Surprisingly, Takane apologizes for pushing him so hard on his first day, her tone unusually soft. Curious, Koshi asks what she would have done if he hadn't stood up to deliver her paper earlier. Takane admits with a smirk that she hadn't planned anything at all. She was completely confident he would act in her favor. She flips the question back at him, asking why he did it. Koshi fumbles for a response, unsure of his own motivations. Takane decides to answer for him, suggesting it's because he doesn't want anyone else to see her plot but him. The bold suggestion causes him to go quiet, caught off guard. He tries to deny it, but doesn't know what else to say. Takane, smiling with amusement, says she wouldn't mind if he was a little possessive. His face burns at her words, and in an effort to change the subject, he brings up the strange noise she made earlier. She immediately denies making any such sound, brushing it off with a suspiciously quick response. Later that night, Takane returns home and begins packing her bag for tomorrow. She takes her time, carefully choosing which pair of plot to bring, giving more thought than usual, not just for function, but also considering which ones she thinks Koshi would like best. Swim class begins with a splash of excitement. Takane easily defeats a member of the school's swim team, someone who has been rigorously training since joining. Her victory is so clean and confident that the whole class erupts in awe, unable to believe how effortlessly she glides past her opponent. Yet despite the cheers, Takane doesn't look the least bit satisfied. Without warning, she announces a redo, and before Koshi can even question her decision, the familiar sensation of time rewinding hits him like a wave. When the moment resets, they're back at the start of the race, and this time, Takane chooses to swim using the backstroke. Koshi watches quietly, noticing the change in her movement and inevitably her form. The backstroke gives him an unintended but clearer view of her body, and while he tries to maintain his composure, he quickly realizes he's been staring. Embarrassed, he turns away, his heart thudding with anxiety as he glances around to make sure no one caught him ogling. Once again, Takane finishes in first place. She exits the pool with grace and approaches Koshi directly, already reading his expression. She asks why he didn't question her decision to rewind time despite winning earlier. Koshi, still flustered, simply says he didn't have time to ask. Takane explains that it wasn't just about winning, it was about how she won. She wanted to make a lasting impression, not just cross the finish line first. Her backstroke, she claims, added more flair to the moment. Then she playfully leans in closer and asks if he prefers the backstroke over freestyle. Koshi stiffens. If he admits he liked the backstroke, it's like confessing he enjoyed the view. But before he can fumble out a response, Takane circles in front of him and teases him mercilessly for getting caught looking. His ears burn red as he tries to shift the topic. In a desperate attempt to change the subject, Koshi asks how she was able to use her ability during the swim, noting that she didn't appear to be wearing any plot. Amused by his honesty, Takane tells him to look closely. He realizes she was wearing the special plot to prevent the tent from showing. Koshi, now fully flustered, can't hide the overwhelmed look on his face. Takane smiles teasingly at him and tells him to meet her after class. Later that afternoon, the two of them head to a department store and Koshi finds himself reluctantly standing in the women's plot section. He's overwhelmed, unsure where to rest his gaze without seeming pervy. Takane, of course, revels in his discomfort and casually tells him to help her choose new plots since he's the one who has to put them on her anyway. Koshi tries to be agreeable, knowing full well that resistance only leads to more teasing. He closes his eyes and reaches out, randomly selecting a set of plots from the rack. When he turns to show her, he is met with teasing, which confuses him. When he opens his eyes to peek, he lets out a horrified squeak. He's picked something very revealing and wildly inappropriate. Koshi, embarrassed by his earlier impulsive pick, hastily returns the revealing plot to the rack and tries to approach things more seriously. After a few moments of thoughtful browsing, his eyes land on a light blue pear. It's simple but elegant, and for some reason, it just feels right. Without overthinking it, he hands it to Takane. Takane raises an eyebrow at his choice but seems genuinely intrigued. She asks him why he picked it, but Koshi, trying to dodge potential teasing, just shrugs and says there wasn't any special reason. She then announces she's going to try it on and, to Koshi's surprise, drags him along into the fitting room. She reassures him nonchalantly that she's wearing dark tights underneath so he won't see anything inappropriate. Even with her being technically covered, Koshi turns red instantly and refuses to look, turning away in panic. Amused by his reaction, Takane keeps teasing him, coaxing him to finish the task he's become all too familiar with. The moment overwhelms him and he passes out. Though Takane was initially concerned when he fainted, she quickly returns to her usual self once he wakes up, playfully mocking him for collapsing during a simple task he's supposedly trained for. Later, while they're alone in the elevator, Takane circles back to the question. She demands, more forcefully this time, to know why he chose that specific plot. With her hands slammed against the wall beside him, cornering him, Koshi finally caves. He admits that the color reminded him of the sky and the sea, both of which felt fitting for someone as elegant and distant as Takane. But as soon as the words leave his mouth, he realizes how silly and childish it sounds. Takane doesn't say anything immediately. The elevator doors open and she walks out without reacting, leaving Koshi frozen in uncertainty. Regret sinks in. He rushes after her and, a little out of breath, asks her if she even likes the plot. She eyes the package in her hands and quietly admits she does, mainly because she doesn't have to put it on, he does the work. The next day, Koshi arrives at school despite catching a cold. He drags himself through the day, and by the time classes end, he's ready to collapse. On his way out, his legs feel wobbly and his vision blurry. He feels like he's about to fall over. That's when Takane appears beside him without a word, slipping an arm around his elbow to steady him. She tells him not to be stubborn and insists on walking him home, mentioning that her house isn't too far from his anyway. Upon entering Koshi's room, Takane takes a curious look around, clearly surprised by how neat and organized it is. Her curiosity quickly takes over and she starts exploring the space more freely, even going so far as to open up his laptop. She clicks through the files, obviously expecting to find something incriminating or perverted, but her expression grows more disappointed the deeper she digs. There's nothing there that satisfies her teasing instincts. Koshi notices and rushes over in panic, slamming the laptop shut and accusing her of only helping him home so she could snoop around his room. Takane denies the accusation with her usual cool demeanor, insisting that she came purely out of responsibility. According to her, if he gets too sick to carry out his duties as her closet, her day would suffer. So nursing him back to health is a matter of self-preservation, not curiosity. She then starts asking about his health habits, specifically his appetite. When Koshi admits that he hasn't been eating much lately, she frowns at his stubbornness. Ignoring his protests, she announces she'll make him something healthy. Half joking, half serious, she teases that she'll cook wearing only an apron, just to keep him motivated. When she sees the mental image clearly reflected in his embarrassed expression, she piles it on, adding that she'll also feed him personally and even wipe the sweat off his body. As his face burns redder with each word, she playfully hints that if he gets enough energy back, maybe he can even enjoy some other activities before bed. Koshi, overwhelmed, tries to push her out of the room, insisting she go home before she catches his cold. Takane pauses, realizing that prolonged exposure might actually get her sick, and casually uses her ability. The next thing Koshi knows, he's standing in his room beside a low table, now with a freshly prepared meal in front of him. Takane stands by the door, giving him a list of instructions before leaving. She promises to check in on him again later, and he wonders if she rewound time just to erase the teasing. Now the food is proof she cared enough to prepare something for him. He takes a tentative bite and is immediately surprised by how good it tastes, especially considering how he hadn't felt hungry at all earlier. As he eats, he reflects on Takane's contradictory behavior, how she effortlessly switches from being seductive and playful to genuinely caring and thoughtful. It confuses him, and he wonders if she only acts this way because he eats her closet or if maybe there's something more to it. After he finishes eating and settles into bed, Takane returns quietly and begins gathering the empty dishes. When he tells her the food was good, she gives a small, satisfied response. Just as he begins to relax again, he's startled to find her slipping under the covers beside him. Wide-eyed, he demands an explanation, but she calmly insists it's for his own benefit. He needs to stay warm to recover quickly. Koshi tries to argue, but before he can fully protest, she uses her ability again. Time jumps, and they're now back in bed together. Takane explains matter-of-factly that she redid their PE class that day, ensuring she didn't sweat much so she wouldn't stink beside him. Now, she says, there's no reason for him to be uncomfortable. Seeing that Koshi was still displaying resistance, Takane wondered aloud if he would have preferred her smelling sweetier instead. Koshi quickly shut that down, saying it had nothing to do with sweat, and expressed frustration at being teased even while he was sick. He turned away from her, asking her to go home, clearly no longer in the mood to indulge her antics. But Takane didn't budge. Instead, she slid fully under the blanket and pressed up against him, saying she was being serious and wanted to take care of him. She added that he could think of her as a warm water bottle if it helped as she scooted closer. Koshi's panic kicked in. There was no way he could think of her that way, not when the most beautiful girl in school was lying beside him. He desperately tried to think of anything else, but her warmth and proximity made it impossible. With her body pressed to his, Takane finally apologized for teasing him earlier, especially about his condition. Koshi started to turn toward her only for Takane to gently pull his head to her plot, claiming it was for oxytocin release. She explained that skin contact helps people relax and feel better. Despite the embarrassment, he slowly began to feel safe and relaxed in her arms. The sincere apology, paired with her unexpected gentleness, made a deeper impact than he expected. His thoughts wandered to her again. Despite her usual composed and confident demeanor, he started to see the human side of her more clearly. As he felt himself drifting off, he mumbled a question about her odd kindness, wondering if it's only a trick to keep him on the hook. Takane was caught off guard. She hesitated, then softly asked what kind of answer he would want to hear. But by then, Koshi had already fallen asleep. She blinked in surprise and softened her gaze as she looked down at him. Eventually, she started her walk home alone. Takane was suddenly hit with a memory as a group of kids ran past her. As a child, she had always been on her own. Her peers avoided her, and she often walked home in silence. One afternoon, she stopped to feed a stray cat, and that's when Koshi, awkward and kind even back then, had approached and offered his milk to the animal too. Later, in her room, she lay on her bed wondering about Koshi's question. Kuro, the same black cat from her childhood who she eventually adopted, approached her, hoping for her attention. As she plays with Kuro, she begins to think Koshi is silly to think she'd go through all that effort just to keep him as her closet. Back at his place, Koshi eventually stirred awake and noticed a message from Takane on his phone. She had already left, letting him know there was food for him in the fridge. He slowly got up, reheated the meal, and ate it, the taste and warmth reminding him of how she cared for him earlier that day. His thoughts lingered on her again, on her contradictions, her teasing, her kindness, and he couldn't help but wonder how much of it she truly meant. On their usual walk to school, Koshi is blindsided by the realization that a certain homework assignment is due that day, a critical one that, if missed, would land him in remedial summer classes. Panic sets in immediately, but Takane, surprisingly sympathetic, expresses concern not for him but for the teachers who'd have to tutor someone like Koshi over the break. To spare them, she casually offers to help him finish the homework during lunch, but her offer comes with a condition that makes Koshi quickly reject the idea. She notes that perhaps their recent long-distance run had sparked something in him, some drive or motivation she hadn't seen before. Still, she reminds him not to neglect his duties as her closet, no matter how busy he gets. Throughout the day, Koshi is a flurry of focus, careful to keep his notebook hidden from teachers. But frustration soon mounts. Academics never came easily to him, and the looming deadline only worsens his anxiety. Mid-class, he looks up from his notes just in time to see a minor incident unfold at the front. Takane, writing an answer on the board, is lightly bumped by their teacher, resulting in her writing a slightly incorrect character. For a brief moment, Koshi sees it in her eyes. She's considering using her ability to rewind time, but then she doesn't. Instead, she cleverly reworks the character into an unexpected, but technically correct solution, earning a wave of impressed murmurs from the class. Later during break, he overhears another subtle moment. A girl approaches Takane to thank her for suggesting a smartwatch as a gift for her boyfriend. It had been a hit, but she expresses mild regret that a newer model was released shortly after. Koshi watches closely. Takane's fingers twitch, her eyes shift. She's clearly weighing whether to reset the day and offer the newer model instead. But again, she resists. Instead, she pulls out her phone and offers a simple present-day solution: trade-ins. In art class, Koshi continues to observe her. There are subtle signs, moments where she hesitates, each time clearly an internal battle against the urge to use her ability. By the end of the school day, Koshi triumphantly submits his homework, feeling a wave of relief. As he steps out of the teacher's office, he notices Takane standing nearby, swaying slightly, a faint flush color in her cheeks. Concerned, he rushes over to check on her. She brushes off his worry, saying there's nothing about today she would want to redo. But Koshi can see through her facade. He gently kneels in front of her, urging her to use her ability if it means easing her pain. Still, she refuses, stubborn as ever, trying to convince him that today had gone fine. But eventually, she falters, quietly admitting that she feared rewinding the day would mean he wouldn't finish his homework. Koshi remains firm, insisting that Takane use her ability to undo the toll the day had taken on her. Eventually, she gives in, but only on one condition, that he be the one to activate her ability for her. Still, she makes one last attempt to dissuade him, reminding him that if she resets time, he'll need to redo all his homework. Koshi responds with more confidence than usual, telling her it's fine. He now knows most of the answers and can complete it faster the second time. What matters more is that she feels better. Takane stares at him for a moment, then nods, allowing him to activate her power. Though slightly nervous, Koshi closes his eyes and activates her ability. The familiar, disorienting sensation of time rewinding washes over both of them. But when it stops, Koshi looks around and realizes nothing major has changed. It's still the end of the school day. Confused, he asks Takane why they didn't go back further. She calmly explains that she only rewound time by a few minutes to just before he found her exhausted. Rewinding any more would have forced him to redo everything, and she didn't want to erase the effort he put into completing his work. She admits she'd rather handle things differently next time and offers to tutor him through his summer assignments so they won't end up in the same situation again. True to her word, during the summer break, Takane spends several days tutoring Koshi at her house. On one such day, despite having just been taught, Koshi repeatedly gets the answers wrong. Takane, clearly frustrated, sighs and uses her ability to rewind the session, allowing him to redo the worksheet. She casually complains about her mom being away, noting that if her mother were home, she would have made sure things were more accommodating for guests. That's when it hits Koshi. They're completely alone in her house. The realization flusters him, being in such close proximity to someone like Takane, who's beautiful and unpredictable, makes him self-conscious. He tries to focus on the worksheet, but is immediately startled when Takane appears behind him, scolding him for making another mistake. Before he can react, she rewinds time again, telling him to start over. By the time the sun starts to dip below the horizon, Takane checks his progress. Seeing that he's only halfway done, she playfully accuses him of dragging things out on purpose so he can spend more time with her. Koshi fumbles to deny it, clearly flustered, but she nonchalantly mentions that he's not actually alone with her in the house. There's a third resident, her cat. Koshi expresses interest in seeing her cat, but informs her that he can't own one himself due to his mom's allergy. He politely asks to meet her cat anyway, hoping it might serve as a break from their intense study session. Initially, she refuses, warning that he'll just get distracted again. Koshi tries to bargain, saying that seeing the cat would motivate him to work faster. With a reluctant sigh, she stands up from her bed to go retrieve her pet, muttering something softly as she exits, something Koshi doesn't quite catch. To his surprise, when she returns, she's not holding a cat. Instead, she's wearing cat ears and a collar herself. She nonchalantly informs him that her real cat is currently playing outside, so she'll have the cat in the meantime to help motivate him. Without missing a beat, she gets into character, lounging and stretching like a lazy feline, her expression distant and playful. Koshi, completely flustered, tries his hardest not to look at her so he can concentrate on the worksheet in front of him. But Takane, amused by his resistance, starts crawling closer, purring and nuzzling up to him just enough to draw out a reaction. Eventually, Koshi can't take it anymore and pleads with her to stop. She notices the redness creeping up his neck and to the tips of his ears, and satisfied with the effect she's had, agrees to ease off. Though she admits she's enjoying the role too much to stop entirely just yet. With a teasing grin, she stretches her arms and then sprawls across his lap like a lounging cat, clearly having fun at his expense. Despite the distractions, Koshi finally manages to complete the homework by nightfall. As she walks him to the door, Takane complains that they only managed to get through one worksheet after spending the entire day together. Still, Koshi is genuinely grateful for her help and thanks her sincerely. But as he opens the door to leave, they're both greeted by the sound and sight of heavy rain. Takane quickly tells him to stay over, noting that the weather report predicted rain through the night. Koshi tries to be polite and offers to sleep in the hallway, but Takane tells him there's a spare room. She casually adds that she'll warm up some food for him and even jokes about helping him bathe. Just then, the sound from another room alerts them. Takane's real cat has returned. She offers to go get him so Koshi can finally meet him. When she comes back holding a sleek black cat, she introduces the feline as Kuro. Koshi's eyes light up at the sight, and Takane watches him expectantly, hoping for a sign of recognition. But Koshi simply marvels at how adorable and well-groomed the cat is, praising its shiny fur. As Takane stands there frozen in disappointment, the room is plunged into darkness due to the rain. Takane quickly regains her composure after the lights go out, brushing off the momentary shock and declaring that the power will probably return soon. She suggests they make the most of the situation. She then sits back down on her bed and orders Koshi to entertain her with a story. Takane is disappointed by his hesitation and narrows her request. She wants a story from their elementary school days, admitting that despite being classmates since childhood, she doesn't remember much about him. Trying to guide him closer to a specific memory, Takane brings up the topic of what he used to do after school, clearly hoping he'll recall a certain rainy afternoon and a small black cat. But Koshi simply smiles and begins reminiscing about going to friends' houses and playing monster hunting games. This visibly irritates Takane, so she urges him to try harder to dig deeper into his heart for more meaningful memories. But Koshi only shrugs, reaffirming that those afternoons spent with friends were his fondest times. Letting out an annoyed sigh, Takane stands and grabs a water bottle. Instead of offering it to him right away, she takes large gulps from it, deliberately letting droplets spill down the bottle and onto the floor. She finishes the bottle with a dramatic breath and points toward the small puddle on the floor with her toes, telling him he's free to help himself if he's thirsty. Koshi stares at her, baffled by the passive-aggressive gesture, unsure why she's so frustrated. Returning to her bed, Takane reclines and demands another story. When Koshi begins recounting the time he earned a ridiculous nickname in 4th grade, she immediately cuts him off. Under pressure and now thoroughly confused, Koshi's thoughts begin to spiral. He realizes she's not giving him any real time to gather his thoughts, and with a polite tone, he asks if he can use the shower, anything to get a break. Takane nods and walks off to prepare it for him, giving him a short moment of peace. While she's away, Koshi gently strokes Kuro's fur, enjoying the rare calm. But the moment is short-lived. Takane soon returns, casually announcing that she ended up using the last of the towels and supplies herself. Hours pass, and Koshi still struggles to think of a story that will satisfy her. He glances over to find that Takane has dozed off, waiting for him. Kuro, now curled up on his lap, snoozes peacefully, and something about the scene nudges a distant memory loose. Softly, Koshi begins speaking to no one in particular, describing a rainy afternoon from his childhood where he had shared a quiet moment with a girl while they both fed a stray black cat. Takane stirs at the sound of his voice and quietly smiles as she sits up. At last, he remembered, but not entirely. He speaks fondly of the girl and the cat, but doesn't seem to connect the memory to the present. Facing away from him, Takane asks why he doesn't consider that day to be one of his fondest. Koshi admits that the girl had once confessed her feelings, but he had been too stunned to respond. After that day, both she and the cat vanished from his life. He had gone back to their meeting place, but it was always empty. Takane turns to face him, curiosity and anticipation in her eyes. She asks him what he would do if he ever met that girl again. Koshi looks at her directly, and for a moment, there's hope in her eyes, until he asks her if she has a clue about who the girl is. Takane masks her disappointment and decides not to correct him. Even if he hasn't put the pieces together, the memory is still alive in him, and that's enough for now. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder shakes the room. Takane flinches, trying to cover her reaction with a mocking comment accusing Koshi of being the one scared. But another flash of lightning and a louder rumble makes her jump again, and this time she instinctively throws her arms around him. Koshi falls but otherwise remains frozen as Takane clings to him. In that moment, it becomes clear to him, Takane had been prolonging the evening not out of obligation or mischief, but because she hadn't wanted to face the storm alone. Embarrassed but comforted, she buries her face into his shoulder and tells him to forget it anyway. Takane, still clutching him as another wave of thunder rolls in, allows herself a small, hidden smile. After what seems like forever, the lights finally return. Takane stands up, casually announcing that she will make dinner, but only for herself since she is still upset with Koshi for forgetting their past. But after seeing how upset Koshi is, she decides to make enough for two. Before leaving the room, she proposes a game to lighten the mood. They will pretend to be newlyweds, since there's no one else to entertain them in the house. The rules are simple. They have to act like a married couple, and if either of them breaks character, the loser will face a punishment. Takane decides the punishment will be eternal singlehood, an idea that immediately draws a strong reaction from Koshi. Unfazed, she coolly reminds him that with his current chances of finding love, he has nothing to lose. She then leaves the room with a playful remark telling him to join her when he is ready. After a few moments, Koshi walks into the kitchen and is stunned to see Takane wearing an apron. Out of habit, he refers to her by her school title, which nearly cost him the game. Fortunately, she decides to let it slide as his first offense. She reminds him that, as newlyweds, they should be more familiar with each other, prompting him to call her by a nickname like how she calls him Honey since the game started. Debating on what to call her, he settles for simply calling her Takane, which makes him flustered since first names are reserved for people with close relationships. Takane, in contrast, responds without hesitation, as if it is the most natural thing in the world. Still reeling from the informality, Koshi awkwardly points out that she should wear more protective clothing while cooking. She teasingly agrees, adding that he could help her change into something more suitable, and orders him to do so. As Koshi finishes doing her demands, she then asks him if he could stir the sauce so it won't burn. Determined to be useful, Koshi begins stirring the pot, but his attention keeps wandering back to Takane. Her presence is too distracting. Eventually, she notices the stew starting to burn and quickly uses her ability to rewind time, just far enough to reset the moment before it starts going wrong. She scolds him lightly, frustrated at how useless he is in cooking. With her guidance and a few timely corrections, the meal is finally ready. Koshi is genuinely impressed by the variety and presentation. As he compliments her skills, Takane sits down beside him and positions herself closely. She insists on feeding him the first bite. Koshi is taken aback and quickly insists that he can feed himself just fine. Takane, almost innocently, wonders what the problem is. They are supposed to be married. It takes Koshi a moment to remember that they're still role-playing. Suddenly, a drop of sauce lands on Takane's leg. Alarmed, Koshi searches for a way to clean it up, worried that it might burn her. Takane, with a slight pout, feigns hurt, not from the sauce, but from the wasted food. Then she makes a shocking suggestion for Koshi to lick up instead. Koshi freezes, completely thrown off by her boldness. While he's too stunned to respond, Takane discreetly activates her ability. By the time he regains his senses, she is already grinning. She informs him that she rewound time, just enough to erase her earlier suggestion, and teasingly adds that it would have been funny to watch him lift the air. Koshi stares at her in disbelief, still trying to process what just happened. He wonders how she even activated her ability without him noticing. With a playful tug at her apron, Takane tells him to pay more attention or she'll keep gaining the upper hand. Then, with a smirk, she assures him that she will never let him lick her leg. After dinner, Koshi thanks Takane for the meal, admitting that it was delicious, though in truth he could barely taste any of it. He had been too nervous the entire time. Takane then announces she'll prepare a bath, prompting Koshi to offer to clean the dishes so she can enjoy her soap first. She pauses, glancing back at him, and suggests that they should go together since they are married. Koshi immediately refuses, insisting she go ahead while he waits for morning and the game is over. Seeing how genuinely flustered he is, she decides to stop teasing and lets him bathe first. As Koshi begins to wash himself in the bathroom, he notices Takane's shampoo sitting on the rack. Curious and almost feeling like he's being pulled by an invisible force, he slowly reaches for it. Just as his fingers are about to graze the bottle, the door opens and Takane steps in. Startled, Koshi tries to scold her, claiming she's taking the game too far, but she only smirks, catching him in the act. She retrieves the shampoo and playfully offers it to him as a souvenir. He refuses to look at her, assuming the worst, but she casually reveals she's wearing a bathing suit, so there's nothing inappropriate going on. Even with that reassurance, Koshi is too embarrassed to meet her gaze and promises to leave as soon as he's done. But Takane isn't done playing. She slips into character again, insisting that, as his wife, it's her job to wash his back. Deciding it's better not to argue, Koshi agrees to go along with her idea. He mentally prepares himself to stay calm, reminding himself that this is still part of the game. They're just acting. That illusion shatters the moment he feels Takane's hands gently touch his back. He freezes in place, his brain racing. Takane leans in close and whispers into his ear, expressing genuine surprise at how muscular he actually is. Koshi, flustered beyond belief, begins counting prime numbers in a desperate attempt to keep his thoughts from wandering. But the distraction fails when he feels something soft press against his back. Panicking, he dares to sneak a glance, only to discover that Takane has placed balloons between them, acting as a barrier to prevent any direct contact. After what feels like an eternity, she finishes rinsing his back. Koshi sighs inwardly, thinking he's finally made it through. But before he can relax, Takane suddenly moves in front of him, casually offering to wash his hair next. Koshi tries to protest, arguing weakly that they only agreed on the back. But Takane smoothly counters that she never said she would stop there, only that she would start there. With no way out, Koshi braces himself again as she begins lathering his hair. He tries to stay composed, but the moment she mentions that she's using her own shampoo on him, mental images of her overwhelm his thoughts. Unable to take it any longer, he stammers an excuse and dives into the bath, hoping to cool down. Takane opens her mouth to tease him but pauses, recognizing from his frantic reaction that she may have pushed too far. Her expression softens, and without another word, she hurriedly leaves the bathroom, letting him finish in peace. Alone at last, Koshi exhales deeply, the tension finally lifting from his shoulders. Later that night, lying awake in the guest room, he wonders why Takane always takes things to such extremes. Just then, he hears her voice from the hallway, reminding him to set his alarm since she's heading to bed too. Without warning, she walks in and climbs on top of him, declaring that as a higher being, she's more important than he is. Koshi looks up at her, and in that moment, it becomes clear. This whole game had just been her way of covering up her fear of the thunderstorm. As he stares at Takane looming above him, he knows the truth. There's no game he can ever win when it's against her. Days later, the two of them go on patrol at their town's summer fireworks festival. When Koshi arrives, Takane is already waiting, dressed in an elegant yukata. He notes that he is on time, but Takane points out that she always arrives 5 minutes early, so as her closest subordinate, he should have arrived 10 minutes before the agreed-upon time. She immediately decides to start patrolling and leads them to areas where students usually hang out. As Koshi follows her, he can't help but admire how graceful she looks in her yukata. After walking for a while, Takane deems the area safe enough for a break and asks Koshi to help her prepare to use her ability just in case. Koshi is confused, wondering when she even used it, since he didn't sense anything. Takane explains that she hasn't yet but forgot to do her usual preparations before leaving the house, so he needs to help her now. Koshi hesitates, noting how crowded the place is, but Takane assures him it's safe and that no one will be paying attention. Seeing Koshi struggle to come up with a discreet way to help, she pretends to ask him to fix her sandals. Koshi catches on and assists her. She thanks him in a tone that sounds unusually friendly, almost like a lover, which flusters him. Koshi quietly enjoys this side of Takane. He never expected her to sound so cute. Then Takane announces that it's nearly time for the fireworks and suggests they find a spot to watch. On the way, Koshi overhears murmurs from festival goers who assume he and Takane are a couple. The idea embarrasses him. In his mind, he's sure Takane would be less than thrilled to hear people mistaking them for lovers. He briefly imagines what being in an actual relationship with her would be like. He figures she'd still take the lead and treat him like a servant. As they pass by a couple nearby, Koshi hears the girl inviting her boyfriend to hang out more after the fireworks. It makes him wonder how such a scene would play out if it were him and Takane. His thoughts are interrupted when Takane suddenly calls his name. She determines there are no troublemakers in the area and activates her ability to rewind time, giving herself more time to check other spots before the fireworks begin. Koshi finds himself at the start of their patrol again, only this time Takane leads him somewhere else. They arrive in a place crowded with adult couples, and Koshi sees one pair sharing a kiss out in the open. Beside him, Takane asks for a drink, wanting a short break. Koshi backs away slightly, thinking she must have seen the same couple and fearing she might tease him again. He nervously pulls out a bottle of tea, briefly imagining a romantic scenario where they share a drink. Takane calls his name again, wondering why he's taking so long. When he hands her the bottle, she declines and instead asks for his help with her ability again. This same pattern repeats throughout the evening. After every patrol round, Takane rewinds time and takes them to a different area. Each time, Koshi notices her mood becoming increasingly subdued. Eventually, they end up in a quiet spot with no one else around. Koshi begins to wonder if he's the reason for Takane's change in demeanor. He reflects on her actions and starts to notice a pattern. Her mood shifts always happen after a break, right before she uses her ability again. A thought crosses his mind that Takane is trying to confess something to him, waiting for the perfect timing and setting, and the constant resets are her way of chasing that perfect moment. He quickly brushes off the idea, assuming he's just overthinking again. He knows she'll scold him if she catches him zoning out. Suddenly, the fireworks begin. Takane asks what he thinks of the view. Koshi responds that it's beautiful, stumbling over his words. Takane chuckles lightly at his flustered tone. As the fireworks light up the night sky, Koshi turns to her, stunned. At that moment, both she and the fireworks are a breathtaking sight to behold. When the show ends, Takane calmly suggests they head home. One summer evening, Takane calls Koshi and invites him to visit Ogaku campus, which is holding an open campus tour for prospective students. Even though entrance exams are still a year away, Takane wants to explore whether Ogaku would be a good fit for her. Koshi agrees to come along, though he feels insecure, thinking he doesn't stand a chance of getting into such a prestigious university alongside her. When Takane casually asks about his future plans, Koshi struggles to answer. He hasn't really thought about what he wants to do after high school. Before he can come up with a response, Takane interrupts, reminding him that as her closet, it's his duty to follow her. The comment makes Koshi panic. If he really has to follow her, that would mean either enrolling in the same university or becoming a NEET. Takane shrugs, saying he can choose either path as long as he can keep being her closet. What he does with the rest of his life doesn't concern her. Later, she video calls him, excited to show off some newly purchased clothes. Koshi flusters at the sight, a wave of embarrassment washing over him. Takane explains that she bought the outfit online because the last time she tried purchasing something similar in a store, the cashier seemed too embarrassed to even look her in the eye. She then pins the blame on Koshi for her curiosity about this particular clothing style. After all, it was his suggestion during one of their earlier shopping trips. She pans the camera to give him a full-body view and teases him not to hit the end call button by accident. Takane then tries to tempt him further, suggesting he attend the same university so he can see her in nice outfits every day. She even mentions an interesting club at Ogaku that embraces the style of clothing she's wearing now. Koshi, now red-faced, pleads with her to stop joking and begs her never to actually join such a club, even if she's only using it to tease him. Amused by Koshi's protectiveness, Takane seems to find a new strategy to convince him. She sets her phone down, adjusts the angle, and speaks directly to the camera, giving Koshi a full and clear view of her. She tells him that he should enter the same university so he can serve as both her closet and bodyguard, promising to reward him for fulfilling his duties. Koshi feels completely cornered. He knows Takane is well aware of his academic standings and is purposely pushing him. Just then, her cat Kuro bats at the phone, accidentally turning the camera to show a flustered and embarrassed Takane, a rare sight. She quickly ends the call and sends Koshi a message, saying he can consider that rare glimpse his initial payment. In exchange, she expects him to pass the entrance exam and fulfill his part of the deal. The weekend finally arrives, and Koshi makes sure to reach Algaku before Takane, hoping this effort will make up for everything and keep her from being upset with him. A few moments later, Takane arrives, capturing the attention of nearly everyone nearby. Heads turn in her direction, captivated by her poise and beauty. She suggests that they explore the campus before the orientation begins. As they walk, Koshi follows a few steps behind and can't help but notice how many people, especially guys, stop and stare as she passes by. Watching her move so naturally through the elegant halls and open courtyards, Koshi can't help but feel that Takane truly belongs in a place like this. With her grace, presence, and confidence, she fits seamlessly into such a prestigious university. Takane easily notices how distracted Koshi is and calls him out, telling him to focus on the campus itself instead of constantly staring at her. She adds that while the campus is indeed impressive, the quality of her student life might actually depend on him. The comment catches Koshi off guard. Before he can ask what she means, Takane elaborates by painting a scenario where he doesn't follow her to university. Without him by her side to fulfill his duties as her closet and bodyguard, things could spiral into chaos. Tired of her antics, Koshi weakly counters that it shouldn't be a problem after all. She can just use her ability to undo anything that goes wrong. Takane shoots him a bored look, disappointed that he isn't taking the bait and playing along with her teasing. With a sigh, she drops the joke and returns to the question she had asked a few nights ago about his plans for the future. Caught off guard by the sincerity in her tone, Koshi admits that he's planning to work right after graduation. With his younger sister entering high school next year and his family already financially strained, he feels it's only right to support them rather than add to their burdens. Takane is momentarily taken aback by his answer. His sense of responsibility touches her more than she lets on. After a pause, she decides that it would be best for Koshi to take on a part-time job instead, something flexible enough so he can still serve as her closet. Without waiting for his reaction, she turns and continues walking toward the auditorium, noting that the orientation is about to begin. As they make their way across campus, Takane spaces out slightly, failing to hear Koshi call out to her. She eventually snaps out of her thoughts and they enter the auditorium together. During the orientation, she wastes no time raising her hand to ask whether the institution offers any benefits for students who graduate at the top of their class. Her boldness surprises everyone, especially since she isn't even enrolled yet. The staff member explains that while nothing is guaranteed, some professors do write job recommendations for students who show excellence in specific fields. Koshi is impressed by how intently Takane listens and absorbs the details, only to be surprised when she suddenly activates her ability and rewinds time, returning them to the start of the orientation. She repeats the same question, getting the same answer. Confused, Koshi asks what changed. Takane casually replies that she just wanted clarity. She had used the word institution instead of university the first time, and that had bothered her. As she sits back down, she subtly motions to her skirt and reminds Koshi of his role. Embarrassed but obedient, Koshi crouches down to help, keeping his eyes closed out of respect. Unfortunately, he does it wrong and Takane calmly explains what he needs to fix. Her small movements make it hard for him to do the task properly. After the orientation and the rest of the campus tour, the two of them begin heading toward the exit. Takane seems satisfied with how the day turned out, but Koshi can't help but bring up her earlier decision to rewind time just to rephrase a single word. Takane, in typical fashion, explains that perfection is essential, especially if one wants to become a god. Koshi gives her a look of exasperation, fully aware that there's no arguing with her once she gets like this. In a quiet voice, Takane continues that she simply wants to make the most out of their time together, especially if Koshi ultimately decides to get a job to support his family. Her words catch Koshi off guard. He had assumed that regardless of the path he chose, he'd still be required to serve her. His assumption irritates Takane slightly. With a sharp look, she tells him she was obviously joking. She's not going to force him to follow her if he has different plans. Still, she warns him not to get ahead of himself. He's not free just yet. They still have nearly a whole year left together, and she fully intends to make him serve her to the fullest until then. With that, she turns and starts walking toward the exit, her pace steady and composed. Koshi watches her retreating figure and finds himself thinking back on the past few months of serving as her closet. He knows their arrangement was never meant to be permanent. He should be relieved that there's a clear endpoint to his servitude. And yet there's a strange pang of sadness in his chest, a lingering ache from hearing her casually acknowledge that their relationship would end once their paths diverge. The following day, despite it being summer break, all students are summoned to school for a special announcement. Koshi, still haunted by Takane's words and her expression during the campus tour, finds himself running on little sleep. His thoughts are interrupted by a commotion behind him. He turns to see Takane walking up the street towards school. He greets her with a tired good morning and briefly notices that she looks somewhat gloomy. But just as quickly, Takane shifts back to her usual self, cheerful, smug, and composed. Koshi wonders if he had just imagined her momentary vulnerability. As they walk, he begins to notice the odd looks Takane is receiving from others. When he glances over, he realizes that her outfit isn't properly worn. Flustered, he hurries to block the view of passersby and quietly informs her of the issue. Takane eventually catches her reflection in a glass window. Without a hint of embarrassment, she nonchalantly remarks that it's a new eco-friendly look that reduces CO2 emissions. Still, she adjusts her uniform back to normal and walks on ahead. Koshi is left staring after her, stunned. He knows Takane can be confident and eccentric, but this felt strange even for her. Pushing his doubts aside, he follows her only to notice more odd behavior. She's missing one of her socks and appears to be fumbling with her train pass. Concern creeps in, but he boards the train with her anyway. The carriage is unusually full for a summer day. Takane, unfazed, explains that students aren't the only ones using public transport. Commuters and working adults rely on it every day. As Takane scolds Koshi for not understanding how the workforce operates, he silently makes a vow to himself. If she's having an off day, then he'll be the one to catch every misstep before anyone else can. He'll make sure no one notices anything unusual about her. His resolve is immediately tested when he notices something odd about her school blouse. For a moment, he wonders if she's doing it on purpose. Caught staring, Koshi is quickly teased by Takane. However, even she eventually seems to notice something is off. She casually explains that the blouse is from her freshman year and that she wore it today only because all her other uniforms are still in the laundry. As she shifts her position, she boldly shows off the blouse, not realizing that part of it has snagged on the train door. A sudden jolt of the train rips it open. Acting fast, Koshi moves to shield her from view, apologizing for overstepping. But Takane doesn't say a word. She simply activates her ability. Koshi blinks and finds himself back in his room. It's 7 a.m., meaning Takane has rewound time back to the start of the day. This time, she carries herself perfectly. There are no wardrobe mishaps, no strange behavior, just her usual confident self. No one notices a thing, but Koshi, now aware of what happened, can't ignore what he saw earlier. The expressions she tried to hide weren't imagined. They were real. He begins to wonder if she's feeling sad, maybe even hurt, that their time together is limited. Even if she's trying to play it cool, it's clear they've grown used to each other. The idea of walking different paths is something neither of them seems ready for. Koshi is no exception. The thought of separating from her leaves a knot in his chest, so he decides to make sure they have more time with each other. As he stands in front of the cram school entrance, he doubts whether all the extra hours of studying will be enough to get into the same university as Takane. Even if he passes, he still has to worry about the cost. It feels overwhelming, but he tells himself to take things one step at a time. First, pass the exam. With a deep breath, he steps through the doors. Eyes shut, he braces himself. Then he bumps into someone. He immediately apologizes and instinctively prepares to take the blame. But the girl apologizes back, only to stop mid-sentence as she recognizes him. Koshi stares at her in confusion since he has no idea who she is. After reintroducing herself, Ellie waits while Koshi heads into the cram school building to finish signing up for the extra summer classes. Once he's done, he meets her outside and they both take a walk. They quickly fall into a natural rhythm, chatting about their lives. Their conversation turns nostalgic as they reminisce about their childhood, recalling the days they spent as close friends throughout grade school. Koshi finds himself surprised by how confident and mature Ellie now seems. Noticing his surprise, Ellie grins and reveals that she's now working as an amateur model. Koshi can't help but be impressed, and Ellie, seemingly happy with the reaction, suggests they continue catching up somewhere more meaningful. She takes him to the playground they used to frequent as kids. As they arrive, Ellie fondly describes it as the perfect place to talk about life and get a little sentimental. Without hesitation, she races over to the slides, laughing as she runs toward the structure. Koshi watches her for a moment before his eyes are drawn to a nearby stairway. It leads to a quiet corner of the park, a hidden area where he used to care for a stray cat with a girl he had a crush on. Just as he begins to get lost in the memory, Ellie's voice calls out from above, snapping him out of it. She rushes back down and grabs his arm, pulling him along to explore the park further. They stop near a faucet and remember how they used to refill their water balloons there and play with other kids. Excited by the memory, Ellie suddenly challenges Koshi to a match where the loser has to buy the winner ice cream. Koshi hesitates, pointing out they don't have any balloons. But Ellie is already one step ahead. With a gleeful smirk, she dashes off to look for some. She returns minutes later holding a small bag of balloons. Koshi, amused, asks why she didn't just go straight to buy the ice cream, but Ellie insists it'll taste better if she earns it. As Ellie begins filling up the balloons, she quickly explains the rules. They each get 3 balloons, and the first to get directly hit loses. She hands Koshi 3 modest-sized balloons, but when she fills her own, she makes them massive, clearly trying to tilt the odds in her favor. Her plan backfires when the overfilled balloons explode on her before the game even begins. Soaked through her clothes, Ellie brushes it off with a laugh. Koshi offers to look for a towel, but she declines, saying the water will dry quickly. Still worried, Koshi insists she rest by a nearby kiosk, even promising to buy her ice cream while she waits. At the mention of ice cream, Ellie finally agrees and asks for her favorite popsicle. Koshi heads to a nearby convenience store, a bit concerned about how careless Ellie has become. His thoughts drift to Takane, and he grimaces at the idea of what she'd say if she ever found out he was spending his day playing with another girl. He stops abruptly on the sidewalk, struck by the sudden intrusion of Takane in his thoughts. A few moments later, Koshi returns to Ellie's side, carrying the towel and a popsicle he promised. She greets him with a smile, grateful for the gesture, but playfully shows that her clothes have already dried. The intense summer heat had done its work while he was away. He settles next to her as they both enjoy the popsicle. As they eat their ice cream, Ellie casually brings up his future, asking about his plans for university. Koshi hesitates before responding, speaking quietly and cautiously. He admits that college was never something he seriously considered. His grades weren't exceptional, and money was always an issue, but someone important to him had once suggested they go to the same university. He had told that person it wasn't realistic. The gap between what he wanted and what he could afford or achieve academically felt insurmountable, but something about the look on that person's face after she said it stayed with him. The expression made him want to try, no matter how difficult it seemed. Ellie listens attentively, reading between his words. She connects the dots quickly and guesses that this person must be someone he loves. Koshi denies the implication, but his flustered reaction says more than words could. She gives him a strong pat on the back, happy for her childhood friend. In her eyes, there's something good about seeing someone like him care deeply about another person. She believes the girl probably likes him back, especially if she asks to attend the same university together. Koshi responds again, saying that the girl doesn't think of him that way. He describes how she seems to see him more like furniture. Ellie finds the comparison odd but doesn't press. Instead, she offers quiet encouragement, saying love suits him and that there may still be hope. As they continue talking, Ellie accidentally spills a bit of ice cream on Koshi. She leans forward to clean it away, but Koshi instinctively recoils. Even as he attempts to calm his thoughts, a sudden chill runs through him as he hears a familiar cold voice from behind. He doesn't have to turn to know who it is, but he does anyway. Takane stands there, looking at them accusingly. Ellie glances up, clearly taken aback by Takane's striking appearance. She looks to Koshi and quietly tries to understand who the girl is. Koshi, still stunned, struggles to come up with an answer. Takane's gaze briefly shifts to Ellie's hand. She observes the small distance between the two and remarks with icy amusement on their boldness. Koshi stammers a response, saying something about assuming she was sick. Takane's expression darkens at the remark. She shifts slightly and confidently presents herself, silently challenging the idea of her ever being sick when she's well enough to go out for a walk. Returning to her earlier observation, Takane coolly asks Koshi what exactly he is doing with Ellie. Ellie, misreading the tone completely, assumes that Takane is complimenting her presence. Realizing the tension beginning to build, Ellie steps in to clarify the situation. She explains that she had only invited Koshi to play with water balloons like they used to do as kids, but her explanation seems to fly right over Takane's head. She presses again, asking what exactly they were doing. Koshi answers without hesitation, stating plainly that they were just playing around and having a little fun. Takane stares at them, dumbfounded. Her expression flickers with something between confusion and offense. Ellie, still completely unaware of the misunderstanding, smiles brightly and invites Takane to join the game. However, Takane misinterprets the gesture as mockery. Without waiting for a reply, Ellie hurries off to find more balloons, leaving Koshi and Takane behind. As soon as she's gone, Takane turns her back to Koshi and asks again if they really are going to play around. Koshi, completely unaware of her misunderstanding, answers earnestly that he was planning to play, so long as she was okay with it too. Takane's patience snaps and slaps him across the face just as Ellie returns with a new bag of balloons. Takane lowers her hand but immediately launches into a scolding. She berates Koshi for being thoughtless, for ignoring how she might feel, and for wasting time on meaningless activities when he should be focusing on more important things like their future, like college. As Takane vents her frustration, Ellie suddenly pieces things together. The way Takane speaks, her flustered tone, and the irritation in her voice all point to Takane being the girl from Koshi's earlier story, one he wants to go to college with. Hoping to defuse the situation, Ellie points to the bag of balloons and quickly says that she was the one who forced Koshi to play. Takane glances at the balloons, examining the packaging, and in that moment, realization dawns. Her expression softens as she understands she had the wrong idea all along. At the same time, Ellie studies Takane's face more closely and suddenly remembers her. They had been classmates in PE class back in grade school. Takane remembers too, recalling Ellie as the girl who Koshi used to play with. Embarrassed by the misunderstanding, Koshi and Ellie both apologize for dragging Takane into such a childish situation. Takane attempts to regain her composure by continuing her reprimand, though her voice is gentler this time. She tries to excuse herself, claiming she has other things to attend to, but Ellie grabs her hand gently and pleads with her to stay a little longer. She wants to catch up, to talk like they used to. She calls out to Koshi and tells him to buy them all drinks so they can cool off. Reluctantly, Takane sits beside Ellie on one of the shaded benches. As they wait, Takane attempts to excuse herself again, but Ellie interrupts with a quiet apology. She admits that she's not used to being around boys since she came from an all-girls middle school. Seeing Koshi again after 5 years made her revert to her younger self without thinking. Takane tries to brush off the apology, insisting it's unnecessary, but Ellie continues, speaking more seriously. She admits that if she were in Takane's position, she wouldn't like other girls being too close to the boys she loved either. Takane stares at Ellie in disbelief. The idea that she might have feelings for Koshi is something she wants to deny outright, yet the confident glint in Ellie's eyes makes her hesitate. Before she can even get a word in, Ellie continues to shower her with compliments, wondering aloud if Takane's mature aura and beautiful presence have something to do with her supposed love for Koshi. Again, she tries to form in denial, but Ellie suddenly pulls her into a playful side hug, coaxing Takane to be more honest with herself and her feelings. Takane stiffens in her hold, flustered beyond measure. Before the moment can stretch into something even more embarrassing, Koshi returns. Takane immediately straightens up and hisses at Ellie under her breath to never bring up what they just talked about. She emphasizes that she never admitted anything. As Koshi approaches, Ellie suddenly hops to her feet and announces that she has to leave for a scheduled photo shoot. She gives them both a bright smile, tells Koshi she'll see him at cram school soon, and walks off. Takane watches her go, her mind caught up in the final thing Ellie said. She turns to Koshi and asks, with a sharp edge in her voice, what he meant by going to cram school with Ellie. Koshi explains that he recently decided to take the same entrance exam she plans to take. Though he admits that he's still unsure if he can actually afford to go to college, he wants to at least try. A rush of emotion floods Takane's chest, heat, pride, frustration, and something she doesn't want to name. She tries to hide the mix of feelings by scolding him lightly for not telling her sooner. But before she can dwell on that frustration, she stands up and lays out a plan. She tells Koshi that many universities offer financial assistance to students who pass but can't pay full tuition. She suggests he get a part-time job to cover the rest so his parents won't worry too much. Then, with a look much softer than usual, she promises to help him study. Koshi is stunned. The gesture is grand, unexpected, and filled with the sincerity that Takane rarely displays. He tries to tell her not to bother, he can handle it on his own, but Takane doesn't let him finish. She uses her ability and brings them back just as Koshi was about to refuse her help. She instructs him to just say thank you. She hands him her bag, asking him to do his job, just as he always does. As he fumbles with it, she tells him that she doesn't mind helping him after all. He helps her every day without complaint. She then extends her hand. Koshi hesitates before taking it, and Takane grips it firmly. She promises to work him hard until he passes the entrance exam. Later, they return to Takane's home, and Takane immediately sets up a space for him to get started on his summer homework. It doesn't take long for her to realize just how far behind he is. She watches in dismay as he struggles through the most basic questions. Kuro, sensing the stressful atmosphere, attempts to climb into Koshi's lap for comfort. Takane calls the cat over with a quiet command, and Kuro obediently jumps into her arms. She strokes his fur gently, then leans close and whispers something only the cat can hear as Koshi continues to toil under her watchful eye. After a long and tiring day at cram school, Koshi and Ellie are just about ready to head home when Takane spots them. Noticing their sluggish movements and tired expressions, she casually suggests that all three of them go somewhere to relax. Ellie lights up and immediately recommends a family restaurant she often visits. Upon arriving at the restaurant, they settle into a cozy booth. A waitress approaches them, greeting Ellie with familiarity. After taking their orders, the waitress remarks that she'll be off duty in an hour. Ellie explains that the waitress is a classmate from her high school, and she often eats at the restaurant because her friend always sneaks her extra fries. Since she was the one who suggested the place, Ellie insists on paying for everyone's meal. Takane, keeping to her usual disciplined habits, orders a cup of coffee, commenting that she avoids carbohydrates. As the food arrives, the conversation naturally shifts to cram school. Koshi and Ellie share their relief about ending up in the same class, joking that at least they'll have someone familiar to suffer with. Takane, who has been listening in silence, begins to show signs of irritation. When Ellie reminisces about how she and Koshi used to study together in elementary school, Takane blurts out that Koshi only studies when he's surrounded by cute girls. Ellie, missing the jab in Takane's tone, playfully wishes that Takane had been around during those days too, saying maybe she would have gotten better grades. She then brings up a foggy memory about skipping homework once to play with Takane, though the details are unclear. Takane dodges the memory and instead brings up how Koshi once forced her to wear a cat costume to help him study. Ellie finds the story hilarious and says she envies how even studying becomes fun between the two of them. Curious and wanting to be included, Ellie asks if they could all have a group study session and maybe even a sleepover, reminiscing about how she and Koshi used to have them when they were younger. Takane's tone shifts again, now cold and biting, as she brings up a past incident when Koshi slept over at her place. Koshi, alarmed, tries to explain, but Takane shuts him down with a firm kick under the table. Fortunately, Ellie doesn't catch the implication. Confused by Takane's harshness, Koshi silently wonders why she's being overly mean in front of Ellie. Takane explains in a flat tone that she's simply trying to show Ellie who Koshi really is now, that he's no longer the innocent boy she remembers from childhood. Eventually, the meal comes to an end and they prepare to go home. Ellie, however, asks to speak with Takane a little longer. Once they're alone and out of Koshi's earshot, Ellie turns to Takane and sincerely apologizes if she gave the impression that she was romantically interested in Koshi. As Takane wrestles with her emotions, Ellie calmly reassures her that she has no romantic interest in Koshi. Her voice remains sincere as she explains that she's already dating someone else. Then, almost as an afterthought, she adds with a soft chuckle that if she weren't already taken, she'd probably be more interested in Takane than Koshi. The comment catches Takane completely off guard, leaving her speechless. She opens her mouth to respond, but before she can gather her thoughts, the waitress from earlier arrives. With a casual smile, she turns to Takane, bids her a quick goodbye, and then walks off hand in hand with the waitress. Takane watches them leave in silence, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks as she realizes what Ellie's words truly meant. Later, Takane spots Koshi standing quietly in a park. As she approaches him, she jokes and tells him that he reminds her of the story of Hachiko, the loyal dog who waited every day for his master. With a smirk, she walks up to him and teases him more, claiming that she and Ellie might have poked fun at his expense earlier. However, her tone softens as she admits she had misjudged Ellie. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Ruruka scolds Ellie for flirting with Takane. Back in the park, Takane reveals a plastic bag filled with the leftover water balloons Ellie had forgotten. She offers a challenge to Koshi. They'll each try to land as many hits on the other as possible, and whoever wins gets to make one demand of the loser. Koshi, sensing he doesn't really have a choice, agrees, albeit warily. He figures he'll just play along and miss on purpose to avoid provoking her. He throws the first balloon lazily, thinking she'll dodge it easily. To his surprise, Takane twirls straight into the hit, her clothes immediately getting soaked. She turns to face him with an unreadable expression, and Koshi begins to suspect that she's trying to recreate the atmosphere of his playtime with Ellie the other day. Noticing his distracted gaze, Takane suddenly scolds him for spacing out and accuses him of thinking about Ellie again. Koshi stammers, trying to explain himself, but she doesn't let up. She launches a flurry of balloons at him, catching him completely off guard. Then, with her back turned to him, she smugly declares that she had planned the whole thing, to catch him off guard and win the match in one decisive strike. The game ends and they rest at a gazebo nearby, catching their breath under the shade. Takane demands that he wipe the sweat off her, echoing the way Ellie had wiped him days before. Koshi is now certain that Takane is mimicking everything that happened between him and Ellie. Unsure of her mood, he finally asks if she's angry at him for playing around and not taking his future seriously. To his surprise, Takane softens. She turns her gaze toward him and offers a rare, sincere smile. She tells him that she's actually proud of him for going through cram school, for taking his future into his own hands, and for finally showing signs of growing up. Koshi thinks he's finally off the hook, but Takane firmly repeats her demand that he help clean her up. Knowing there's no use in resisting her, he asks if she wants her neck wiped. In response, she tilts her head and shows him her neck, completely dry. She tells him there are other areas that need attention and leaves it up to him to pick whichever he wants. His brain goes into overdrive. The choice seems impossible. After agonizing over his options, he settles on her stomach, thinking it's the least inappropriate area to clean. When Takane shows him her stomach, Koshi finds himself stunned by the smoothness of her skin. He tries not to dwell on the thought as he quickly wipes away the traces of sweat and water. Once the job is done, they return to the gazebo. Takane praises his effort, calm and composed as if nothing unusual has happened. She explains that the entire game was her idea because she hasn't spent much time with him lately. It was for his sake, and to remind him of his place as her personal assistant, her closet. She hopes that from now on, whenever he visits the park, he doesn't think of his water balloon fight with Ellie, but instead remembers this day with her. When Koshi doesn't respond, she turns to check on him and realizes he is quietly passed out with a fever. On the final day of summer vacation, Takane invites Koshi to visit a relaxation facility. She claims it's something she wants to do before summer ends. Koshi agrees right away, eager to spend more time with her and to show his appreciation for all of her help with studying. They decide to get drinks before exploring the area a bit more, and Takane mentions that she has 2 free drink coupons from an acquaintance. But Koshi has already walked off and returns with 2 cups of coffee, insisting it's his treat since she was the one who invited him out. Unimpressed, Takane rewinds time and tells him to use the coupons and get her a vanilla latte instead. She waits in the bushes, demanding Koshi to do his job first and then get them their drinks. After getting their drinks, they wander through a Nordic-themed gift shop nearby. The place is huge, nearly as large as a department store. They browse through shelves lined with trinkets, snacks, and plush toys. The peaceful atmosphere feels like a quiet celebration of summer's last moments. Takane pauses in front of a plush bunny and picks it up. She cradles it in her palm, softly murmuring about how nice it feels to hold. Koshi sees the perfect opportunity to thank her. He excuses himself, pretending he needs the restroom, and quietly purchases the plush behind her back. As they leave the shop, he prepares to surprise her, but Takane brushes the idea off. She claims she wasn't really interested in the bunny at all, and that looking at herself in the mirror is more satisfying. The comment deflates Koshi, who then sheepishly reveals the toy from his paper bag. He admits that he bought it for her as a way to say thank you. Takane, unsatisfied with the course of events, activates her ability again, rewinding time to the moment before Koshi buys the plushie. This time, instead of letting him go through with the purchase, she tells him that she'd rather give him a present than receive one. Before he can argue, she heads back into the shop, determined to buy the coaster Koshi was talking about earlier. Hoping to shift the mood and give Takane a moment of real enjoyment, Koshi leads her to the docks nearby. They rent a small wooden boat and climb in together. As Koshi rows, the boat glides gently across the water, and both are pleasantly surprised by the calm, dreamlike atmosphere. The reflections shimmer beneath them as if they're floating in the sky. Koshi is especially surprised to learn that this is Takane's first time on a boat, considering how composed and worldly she usually seems. Takane suggests she take over the rowing to give him a break, but Koshi insists on doing it himself, wanting her to relax. Irritated by his stubbornness, Takane suddenly throws herself into the water with no warning. She reemerges moments later, clambering back into the boat, complaining loudly about her soaked clothes and claiming she slipped in. She rewinds time once again, this time to the point before they even board the boat. But when the time reset finishes, Koshi finds himself alone. He looks around and spots Takane already standing near the boat rental area, dry and clearly annoyed. She calls him over sharply, reminding him to do his job so they can move on to the next activity. Koshi notices she's already handled preparations to use her ability again. When he points this out, she grows flustered and angry, blaming him for being too slow that she had ended up doing it herself. She storms ahead, eager to move on and distract herself from her own embarrassment. They make their way up a quiet path on the hill, where the wind brushes through the trees. As they walk, Koshi begins to feel guilty about how many times Takane has seemed frustrated with him today. Unsure of her true feelings, he voices his concerns, wondering if she's actually having fun. Takane stops and turns the question back on him, on why he seems to be acting like a good servant today. After a moment of silence, she shyly confesses that this entire day was planned for his sake, as a thank you for working so hard for her outside of school, and as a break from the pressures of cram school. Koshi stops in his tracks, taken aback. Slowly, the realization dawns on him. Takane has been looking out for him in her own way, making sure he can relax and enjoy the day. He stares at her for a few seconds too long, prompting her to tease him and demand that he stop acting weird. But Koshi smiles and thanks her sincerely, telling her that she doesn't need to go the extra mile because her help with his studies and presence in his daily life already means a lot. He admits that he's found new energy because of her and that planning this day brought him joy because it was for her. Takane hides her eyes behind her wide-brimmed hat, caught off guard by his honesty. But she doesn't look away for long. She lifts her gaze again, smiling fondly. Then, with her usual playful tone, she challenges him to reveal his next plan for the day, so she can judge whether it's actually fun or not. Koshi finds himself once again seated in Takane's room for what's meant to be another focused study session. However, the atmosphere is far from calm. Just half an hour ago, while making his way to her house, he ran into Ellie, who immediately perked up upon hearing he was headed to Takane's for tutoring. Insisting that Takane was an amazing teacher, she asked to join. Despite his hesitation, Koshi found himself unable to say no. Now inside the quiet elegance of Takane's room, Ellie's bubbly presence throws off the usual rhythm. She praises Takane's teaching with exaggerated enthusiasm. Koshi begins to worry. Takane hasn't smiled once. With growing impatience, Takane asks Ellie why she didn't just study with Rurika, her girlfriend. Ellie doesn't feel the bite of her tone and simply mutters that Rurika's been too busy with work lately, so they barely even get to go out. Koshi is momentarily stunned. He had completely forgotten that Ellie once mentioned being into girls back in middle school. As the study session drags on, Koshi begins to feel increasingly uneasy. His suspicions are confirmed when he catches Ellie deliberately brushing her hand against Takane's arm. At first, it seems accidental, but the glint in Ellie's eyes suggests otherwise. Koshi begins to think that Ellie had wanted to come over to flirt with Takane. His thoughts are cut off by Takane, who suddenly commands him to run to the store to buy drinks and snacks. Koshi hesitates. He doesn't want to leave the two alone, but when Takane repeats the order with a sharper tone, clearly wanting him out, he has no choice but to dash out the door. Once Koshi is gone, Ellie shifts the tone of the room. She says she wanted a private talk with Takane, but Takane doesn't wait. She asks Ellie to leave. She admits she finds dealing with both her and Koshi at the same time exhausting. Ellie agrees, but she first asks if Takane and Koshi are dating. Caught off guard, Takane blurts out a denial, stating coldly that she considers Koshi beneath her. Ellie smiles knowingly, interpreting her tone not as disdain, but as poorly concealed affection. She warns Takane that Koshi is incredibly dense. So dense that even if someone were to shout their feelings at him, he might still think it was a joke. Trying to play it safe, Takane begins to speak as though she's talking about someone else, a friend who has feelings for Koshi. Her tone softens as she shares the imagined girl's frustrations, how she tried everything to express her feelings, and yet every attempt was met with indifference or confusion, which had caused her friend to feel as if Koshi did not see her as a woman. Ellie, entertained and charmed by Takane's clumsy attempt to deflect, plays along. She leans in and asks with genuine curiosity what else this friend tried. Takane, visibly embarrassed as the girl tried countless things, cosplaying to get his attention, washing his bath like a servant, and other thoughtful acts, but none of it worked. Ellie listens intently to Takane's story, completely engrossed. Though she knows Takane is pretending to speak about a friend, the underlying emotions are all too real. Still playing along, Ellie presses further, asking if the boy ever did anything sweet for the girl. Takane nods, her voice softer now as she lists a few moments. She recalls how the boy once rushed to the park in a panic, worried something had happened to the girl. There was also the time he nearly gave up a chance to get a good grade, something extremely important to him, just to take care of the girl when she was sick. And in a rare but memorable instance, he had even gone out of his way to plan a thoughtful outing, something that resembled a date, even if he never called it that. But what truly touched the girl's heart was when she discovered the boy was now working hard to enter the same university as her. Despite her feelings, Takane continues, the girl is still afraid. She's unsure if she's simply misreading everything, if the boy is doing these things only out of duty or politeness, or worse, because she's more popular and he feels obligated. Ellie, unable to contain herself, suddenly grabs Takane's shoulder. Her eyes wide and sincere, she pleads with her to tell her friend that when someone consistently does things for another person, especially when they're inconvenient or self-sacrificing, it's already a strong sign of affection. She tells her that the boy in the story clearly cares about the girl, a lot, and maybe he just doesn't realize it yet. Takane, momentarily caught off guard, slowly nods. She says she'll be sure to pass along that message and encourage her friend not to give up hope. But curiosity soon gets the better of her, and Takane asks whether coming to this study session was really just about hearing this story, or if part of it was to get closer to her. Ellie's face turns red, exposed without having to admit anything. Takane, not unkindly, tells her there's no harm in wanting to grow closer, as long as things are kept private. Meanwhile, Koshi finally returns from the store, bags in hand and thoughts racing. As he climbs the stairs back to Takane's room, he braces himself for what kind of chaos might have erupted in his absence. He imagines Takane scolding Ellie for barging in uninvited. But as he reaches the door, he hears something unexpected: laughter. The sounds from inside are cheerful, almost friendly. Pressing his ear against the door, he thinks he hears Ellie teasing Takane. His heart jumps, imagining what kind of scene might greet his eyes. It turns out his worries were simply his imagination, because when he enters, he only sees Takane introducing Kuro, Takane's spoiled black cat. Days later, the second semester is in full swing. The conversation shifts to something mundane: uniforms. Takane shares that she vastly prefers the winter version over the summer one. The summer uniform, she complains, is made from such thin fabric that if she sweats even a little, it becomes nearly transparent. The blazer, she adds, is her saving grace. It prevents awkward situations, and the cooler weather makes it comfortable. That's when it clicks for Koshi. If the old uniform is the only thing preventing her from using her ability, then Takane must have been rewinding time constantly during last year's winter. This means that every time he saw her last year, there was a good chance she had quietly used her ability. Takane notices that Koshi's gaze has grown distant. He's clearly no longer focused on their conversation. Irritated, she calls him out for spacing out and decides to pull him back into the moment with a challenge. She proposes a game, something to sharpen his attention. She tells him to turn around and face away from her. While his back is turned, she activates her ability, rewinding time by a small increment. When he turns back to face her, the change is immediately noticeable. Her umbrella is now missing. Takane grins and tells him the rules. He has until they reach the station to figure out exactly how she used her ability and what has changed, aside from the umbrella. The catch: the winner gets to give the loser a single command. The idea of giving or receiving an order adds a layer of pressure, and for a moment, Koshi feels like he's been lured into a trap. He protests that the game is rigged. How is he supposed to tell what's changed just by looking? But Takane insists there are always signs, especially in how a person moves. She says that Koshi needs to learn how to observe more carefully, not just visually, but through behavior and presence. To further sweeten the deal, Takane notes that she doesn't gain much if she wins, since she already has plenty of ways to control him. But if he wins, she playfully suggests he could finally make her do something embarrassing, like wear a swimsuit in front of him. Koshi blushes in disbelief, quickly denying that he would ever ask for something so bold. Still smiling sweetly, Takane reveals what her order would be. She plans to tie him up and force him to listen to recordings of her voice on repeat. The idea sends a chill down his spine. As they continue walking, Koshi trails a few steps behind, watching Takane closely. He tries to detect even the smallest shift in her gait or posture, hoping it might reveal the answer. But the longer he looks, the more self-conscious he becomes. Anyone who sees him staring might think he's a stalker, and if Takane catches him looking too hard, she'll definitely tease him about it later. He spots a puddle along the sidewalk and considers using it as a mirror to get a better angle without being obvious, but he ultimately decides against it, feeling that it might be too suspicious. Instead, he trusts his instincts and prepares to make a guess once they arrive. Finally, at the station, Takane turns to him and raises an eyebrow, signaling that it's time for his answer. Koshi makes his guess, but Takane gently shakes her head. He was wrong. She explains that he missed several clues she had dropped along the way, subtle hints in how she held herself and small inconsistencies that could have pointed to what changed. Koshi is left disappointed, wondering if his hesitation and overthinking cost him the win. Still, he accepts his loss, though the sting of defeat is clear on his face. Takane surprises him by admitting she's a little disappointed too. She had hoped he would win, just to see what he might order her to do. Her voice grows softer as she adds that she had made it easier than usual, sprinkling clues in his path, but he had missed them all. Koshi's face turns red from embarrassment. He can't believe he failed to notice anything she hinted at. As she moves ahead to board the train, Takane teases him again, reminding him that she still hasn't decided on what order she'll give him. Koshi and Takane stand inside the train as their conversation naturally drifts toward their school's upcoming cultural festival. The topic shifts to their class's chosen performance, a Cinderella play. Takane casually brings up that Koshi's class had done a haunted house the previous year, noting how he barely fulfilled his assigned duties. Koshi admits that he doesn't usually enjoy cultural festivals, hinting that his lack of a social life contributes to it. Still, he's caught off guard that Takane remembered what he did the previous year despite being in a different class. Takane quickly justifies herself, stating it's her responsibility as student council president to keep track of every class. She then turns toward him with a more serious expression, declaring that this year, Koshi will have to participate as an actor. She explains that since she will be Cinderella, it would be inconvenient and strange if someone from the backstage team had to rush up to her every time she needed help activating her ability. To make it happen, she tells him to volunteer for a supporting role, ideally one of the side characters who remain on stage throughout the performance. When they arrive in class, Takane wastes no time and immediately gets down to business. She guides the class through the early planning phase, asking for suggestions and role preferences. As expected, everyone readily agrees that Takane is the perfect choice for Cinderella. Takane then calls for volunteers to join the sound team. Seeing an opportunity to stay behind the scenes, Koshi raises his hand. However, Takane instantly glares at him and activates her ability. Time resets back to the moment just after the class agrees she should be Cinderella. Takane, now acting more casually, calls Koshi up front to assist her in writing names on the board as people list down the roles they want. Her true intention, however, is to keep him close in preparation to help her activate her ability again if needed. She then opens the floor for Prince role volunteers. With Koshi standing directly behind her, she subtly looks over her shoulder, expecting him to take the hint. Koshi, unsure and hesitant, stays silent. When he doesn't respond, several students begin raising their hands. Takane attempts to call for more volunteers to buy Koshi time to reconsider, but her plan is cut short by a voice. Seiya, one of the school's top honor students, confidently volunteers for the role. Koshi instantly recognizes him. Although academically gifted, Seiya has a questionable reputation among the female students. Slowly, one by one, the other candidates lower their hands, assuming Seiya's charm and skill will guarantee the play's success. Takane quietly tells Koshi, expressing concern that if Seiya were to become the prince, she might have to make him the second closest. She admits that Seiya has shown interest in her and would likely request special treatment in return. Faced with the possibility of Takane having to entrust her secret to someone else, especially someone like Seiya, Koshi makes a snap decision. He raises his hand and volunteers for the role of the prince. Since both Seiya and Koshi volunteered for the role of the prince, Takane calmly announces that the class will settle it with a vote. Unsurprisingly, Seiya leads by a landslide. His popularity and confidence win over most of the class, and Koshi receives only a single vote. After the results are finalized and everyone disperses for the day, Koshi walks alongside Takane, his shoulders slumped. He apologizes to her, feeling as though he had let her down by not trying harder to win. When she doesn't immediately respond, a sinking feeling hits him. Takane finally speaks, looking at him with a hint of irritation. She tells him flatly that she only made a comment about needing another closet to push him into volunteering. She had no real intention of choosing Seiya. She tells him there's no need for a second closet at all since Koshi will be playing the role of the prince's guard. It takes Koshi a moment to realize that as the prince's guard, meaning he can continue serving as her closet during the play without drawing suspicion. Takane shoots him a smug look, then turns and begins walking ahead, clearly expecting him to follow. As they head home, Takane casually encourages him to enjoy the experience of acting. Koshi quietly considers her words and then remembers something odd from the class vote earlier. Out of all the ballots cast, one person had voted for him. When he brings it up, Takane only smiles innocently and suggests it must have been a curious classmate. Student preparations for the school festival go into full swing. Homeroom periods and after-school hours are all dedicated to building sets, rehearsing lines, and fine-tuning costumes. On the final prep day, Takane gathers the class and gives a short speech to motivate everyone. She encourages her classmates to lend a hand in other areas if they find themselves free. Koshi initially hangs back, thinking Takane already has plenty of help, but to his surprise, she specifically calls him over and asks for his assistance with painting one of the backdrops. He agrees, but just before they begin, he overhears a group of classmates talking behind his back, questioning why Takane even bothers with him. He tries to ignore their words, but they nod him as he starts painting. His thoughts spiral and his focus falters. Without realizing it, he paints a crucial part of the set wrong. The mistake draws the ire of several classmates, who loudly criticize him for being careless. Before the situation can escalate further, Takane calmly activates her ability. Time rewinds to just before the set painting had begun. Behind one of the props, she calls Koshi over to help her prep for another use of her ability if needed. While there, she lightly scolds him for ruining one of the key pieces of the set. Before Koshi can fully help Takane prepare herself behind the set, they hear voices calling out for her. Some classmates are looking for assistance, and Takane quickly peeks out from behind the backdrop to assess the situation. As she listens in and prepares to head out, Koshi is left to adjust her materials. In his attempt to help, he is unable to fix it properly, which causes it to slip and threaten to fall just as Takane moves to assist her classmates. The moment she steps out and dresses the volunteers, one of the wooden props begins to topple. Reacting swiftly, Takane catches it with perfect grace and hands it back to a nearby student. Koshi rushes to her side and sheepishly informs her that he failed to fix her properly. Takane, however, calmly reassures him that she managed to correct the issue herself when she was at the teacher's desk talking to everyone. In a lowered voice, she gives him a gentle reminder to focus more next time. Though her words carry a trace of reprimand, her tone quickly softens. She encourages him to put his energy into the preparations, and the two of them return to their tasks, painting sets and helping classmates who need guidance. Takane even tries on the maid costume meant for her role. Despite being worn and ragged to fit the theme of Cinderella's early struggles, it still looks elegant on her. As the sky darkens and the last light of day fades, the class finishes most of the work. She gives a short but encouraging speech, thanking her classmates for their effort and motivating them to give their best for the performance. Once dismissed, the students begin packing up to head home. Koshi is ready to do the same when he checks his phone and notices a message from Takane. She instructs him to meet her by the stairwell near the rooftop. Curious, he heads there ahead of time and waits. When she finally arrives, she pulls out a set of keys and unlocks the rooftop door. Koshi steps out into the cool evening breeze and is greeted by a stunning night sky blanketed with stars. Takane quietly explains that she wanted to take in the view with someone. She then turns her gaze upward and admits that this may be one of the last chances she has to appreciate the evening sky from school grounds, especially since next year she'll be dedicating herself fully to university entrance exams. She reflects on how much fun this year has been so far, especially with Koshi by her side as her closet. His presence has made things more exciting, and she's glad to be sharing the upcoming festival with him. He blurts out that there's always the festival 2 years from now. Takane looks over her shoulder with narrowed eyes, suspicious of his implication. She bluntly asks if he's planning on failing just to enjoy the festival on his own. Embarrassed, Koshi quickly clarifies that he meant the University Cultural Festival. Since he plans to follow her to the same university, they'll have more opportunities to enjoy those moments together. At this, Takane grows quiet. The silence lingers long enough for Koshi to feel uncertain, but eventually she speaks again, changing the topic slightly. She begins to talk about her thoughts on the story of Cinderella. At first, she admits she didn't like the tale. She found it frustrating that Cinderella seemed unwilling to change her situation in the beginning, passively enduring her circumstances rather than taking action on her own. However, Takane admits that she can understand Cinderella now. She realizes that the girl must have struggled to find the courage to act and that hesitation is sometimes harder to overcome than the circumstances themselves. With that thought in mind, Takane decides it's finally time to act on her own feelings. Her face is visibly flushed, a mix of nervousness and embarrassment painting her expression as she reaches out and grabs his hand. Just as she opens her mouth to speak, she lets out an unexpected sneeze. Koshi misinterprets the situation, thinking she must be cold from the night air. He immediately apologizes and drapes his school jacket over her shoulders. Caught off guard, Takane grows irritated, partially at Koshi for not reading the atmosphere and partially at herself for fumbling the moment. The following morning marks the official opening of the school festival. With energy running high, Takane addresses her classmates, telling them to do one last full reading an hour before their first performance. This will give everyone time to relax and mentally prepare before going on stage. The class agrees but quickly notices that Seiya has yet to arrive. His absence adds a layer of unease, especially for those waiting to start their final rehearsal. Koshi keeps himself in a quiet corner of the room, attempting to manage his own nerves. She pulls him out into the hallway, saying she can't bear to watch him looking so stiff and uncomfortable. She proposes that they do something fun to help him loosen up. Koshi is momentarily touched by what seems like kindness, but Takane quickly corrects him. She says she only wants to make sure he's relaxed enough not to ruin the play later. As they continue walking, Koshi becomes increasingly self-conscious. Other students begin to notice how close he and Takane are, and whispers start to form around them. Not wanting to draw more attention, he hurriedly tells Takane to enter the nearest attraction. The moment they step inside, the atmosphere shifts. A voice welcomes them to the attraction, and the space transforms into something out of a horror film. Koshi silently praises his plan for helping them escape unwanted attention. But when he gestures for Takane to lead the way, he notices she's frozen, her body tense and her eyes wide with fear. That's when Koshi remembers that Takane is quick to scare. He recalls how she reacted to lightning storms in the summer and realizes she's trying her best not to show weakness. He suggests they leave, but Takane stubbornly refuses. She insists she's fine and moves forward, only to be jump-scared by a student moments later. Reflexively, she activates her ability and rewinds time back to when they first entered the haunted house. Once again, Koshi tries to convince her to leave. Takane quickly claims she was only pretending to be scared to help ease Koshi's nerves. Without giving him time to question it, she straightens up and leads the way toward the exit of the haunted house. But just as she does, a student in a grotesque costume silently sneaks up on Koshi from behind. Takane notices too late and instinctively activates her ability. This time, she rushes over to check on Koshi, anxiously fussing over him to make sure he isn't hurt. Koshi tries to reassure her, gently reminding her that everything inside the haunted house is fake. Realizing the truth of his words, Takane awkwardly backs off, regaining her usual cool composure. She insists that her concern and her apparent fear was all part of a performance, just another layer of her strategy to boost Koshi's confidence. As they walk, he starts to feel a subtle sense of gratitude. He recognizes that, no matter what she says, Takane is trying hard for his sake. Quietly, he admits that he likes her fear of ghosts, finding it endearing. The thought makes him grin, but Takane notices and immediately scolds him for letting his mind wander instead of focusing on getting out. Before he can defend himself, Takane yelps as she feels something tugging at her feet. A student in a giant spider costume emerges, and though it's clearly a prop, it appears too lifelike for her. She lets out a short cry and launches herself straight into Koshi. Koshi tries to calm her down, but a shower of small, plastic spiders suddenly drops from the ceiling, startling her again. She bolts, leaving Koshi behind, and ends up tangled in one of the haunted house's large web props. He quickly catches up to her and tries to help, but she once again claims she's just acting. As he tries to untangle her, they hear the voices of other students entering the haunted house. Realizing Takane is still in a compromising position, Koshi panics. He moves to shield her from view, standing in front of her and pretending to be a monster, hoping to frighten the group away. The act doesn't work, the students are unimpressed and simply walk the other way. Eventually, Takane gets free, and the two exit the haunted house. Koshi apologizes for dragging her into the attraction, but Takane shrugs it off. She tells him it actually worked out well. He seems more relaxed now and even managed to do a bit of impromptu acting under pressure. They return to the classroom to begin rehearsals, only to be met with a concerned classmate rushing toward Takane. Seiya, the one cast as the prince, still hasn't arrived, and no one has been able to contact him. As everyone begins to worry, Seiya finally appears, but his body is covered in bruises and scrapes, and he's clearly in pain. He explains that he was hit by a truck, but insists he can still perform. As he spits out blood mid-sentence, Koshi urges Takane to rewind time to prevent the accident, but she makes the swift decision to replace Seiya, announcing Koshi as the new prince. Without much choice, Koshi ends up becoming the prince in their play. Everyone gathers with bated breath for Takane's play, and soon it begins. The curtains rise to reveal Takane as Cinderella. As Takane acts, everyone backstage rushes to prepare for the next scene, and Koshi reads the script while trying to calm his nerves. He didn't have any say in the matter when he was chosen. He tries to reassure himself that while the prince is on stage often, he doesn't have many lines anyway. He decides to focus only on the lines needed per scene so he won't have to worry about anything else. Meanwhile, on stage, Cinderella's stepmother throws tea on Takane, and as Cinderella, she needs to clean it up. Due to Takane's soulful acting, everyone in the audience is mesmerized. The class starts to feel confident that the play will be an instant hit as Koshi hyper-focused on his lines. On stage, Cinderella is shocked that her sisters are leaving without her even after they promised to take her to the ball. She drops to her knees when her sisters reveal that they'd burned her mother's dress, the one she planned to wear. With the spotlight on her, Takane begins to sing her lines flawlessly, and soon the voice of the fairy godmother is heard. Multicolored lights flash to signify the fairy godmother's magic, and the curtain is pulled to prepare for the scene change. Koshi realizes it's almost time for him to go on stage, and his heart starts to race. Everyone is bustling with energy, but Koshi can only hear the beating of his rapid heart. Takane calmly tells him that they should enjoy themselves on stage, which manages to calm him down a little. Takane steps back on stage, the scene now set at the ball. Her dress is now a beautiful gown in stark contrast to her earlier costume. As Koshi watches her performance, he recalls what Takane had said the night before, that this would be the last cultural festival they get to enjoy in high school. Soon, Koshi's entrance is announced. Despite his nervousness, he moves forward. Determined to make this festival a memorable one for Takane, he starts walking toward her, but freezes when he sees the number of people watching. When Koshi misses his lines, the audience begins to notice and murmurs ripple through the crowd. His mind goes blank. He starts to think that he isn't cut out for this and that he's just ruined the entire play. Takane suddenly pushes him down and activates her ability, returning them to the moment just before the scene shift. She drags Koshi to a corner backstage and scolds him for his performance. Then, shifting her tone, she offers advice. People aren't even paying attention to him, so he shouldn't care about their reaction. Instead, he should just watch her. Their classmates call for them as Takane needs to return to the stage. Before leaving, she reminds Koshi once more about what she said earlier, that he shouldn't waste his energy focusing on the audience. To help him, she adds one more instruction. He should keep his eyes only on her. The scene begins and Takane steps gracefully back onto the stage. Koshi takes a deep breath and tries to collect himself. Then, when his cue arrives, he moves forward, thinking to himself how kind Takane truly is. Even if her words were harsh, they were exactly what he needed to regain his focus and confidence. When he reaches her, he resists the urge to glance at the crowd. Instead, he drops to one knee and offers his hand, delivering his line clearly and confidently, inviting Cinderella to a dance. Takane pauses briefly to observe his delivery, but soon a small smile tugs at her lips. She places her hand on his and gracefully accepts the invitation. Koshi smiles internally, proud that he managed to pull it off. He tries to recall what happens next. According to the script, the lights should cut out while a pin light focuses on Takane for her solo. Then the lights will cut out again, and once they come back on, it will transition directly to the dance scene. With that in mind, he keeps his eyes closed, planning to simply wait until the lights return before he begins moving. But when he opens his eyes again, he's surprised to find himself kneeling directly behind Takane. From his new position, he quickly realizes this is Takane's silent instruction for him to prepare her for her next ability use. However, a jolt of panic hits him. He hadn't brought the materials needed for that. Suddenly, Takane begins to sing, and Koshi notices that she's cleverly hiding extra instructions within her lyrics. She subtly tells him to check his pocket. Confused at first, he does as instructed and finds the extra materials tucked inside the pocket of his costume. She must have placed them there earlier in case of emergencies. Grateful for her foresight, Koshi gets to work, struggling to attach the needed materials to her costume while remaining out of sight. As Takane sings, her performance intensifies, captivating the audience. Koshi carefully adjusts the setup behind her, staying as hidden as possible while keeping pace with her movements. Near the end of the song, Takane walks confidently toward the front of the stage. Her voice crescendos as she hits the emotional climax of the piece, her eyes scanning the audience as if searching for something unseen, part of her acting designed to draw the audience deeper into her story. Suddenly, she begins to spin, and Koshi is forced to spin with her. Despite the complicated maneuver, he manages to fasten the final piece of the material just as she reaches the end of the song. The lights cut to black, and when they come back on, both Takane and Koshi are once again in their original positions. Soon, he finds himself dancing with Takane, moving across the stage with surprising ease. Thanks to the intense situation earlier, all the nervousness that once overwhelmed him has vanished completely. Now, he's simply acting and enjoying the play. Everything begins to flow naturally. Eventually, the play reaches its climax. The stepmother protests that Cinderella cannot be allowed to try on the glass slipper, but the prince insists. As the spotlight narrows on them, Koshi maintains his composure, capturing the role's emotion with surprising authenticity. His expression is firm and he delivers his lines clearly, not a single stutter betraying his nerves. Unbeknownst to them, backstage chaos begins to stir. The spare prince uniform, which had been prepared for emergencies, has mysteriously gone missing. Back on stage, Koshi kneels before Takane, preparing to place the slipper on her foot. Takane quietly teases him under her breath. Koshi tenses up, but before he can react, their moment is shattered by the sudden appearance of Seiya. Seiya steps out from the edge of the stage, dramatically pointing at Koshi and calling him an imposter. The audience, unaware that this isn't part of the script, gasps and leans forward in interest, believing the twist is intentional. Koshi freezes. Seiya, completely improvising, loudly announces that Koshi is merely a commoner who took his place due to injury. Takane and Koshi glance at their classmates in confusion, and they signal them to continue the act. Understanding the situation, Takane quickly adapts, feigning surprise in perfect character. Seiya continues with unexpected energy, claiming Koshi's hands are unworthy to touch Cinderella's feet. To make his point, he flaunts his own hands, calling them noble and refined, fit for royalty. Something about the way Seiya emphasizes Takane's feet makes Koshi uneasy. He begins to suspect that Seiya's sudden outburst is driven by something more selfish, an unhealthy obsession. And now that he's lost his chance to place the slipper on Takane himself, he's trying to hijack the final scene. Koshi's frustration grows. Even though Takane tries to mediate the situation and bring the play back on track, Koshi unexpectedly cuts in, speaking with firm conviction. He declares that he will not give Cinderella up so easily, even if Seiya is the real prince. He accuses Seiya of being self-centered, a prince more concerned with his own desires than Cinderella's happiness. Someone like him, Koshi says, could never bring her true joy. With renewed determination, Koshi announces that regardless of his status, he will be the one to make Cinderella happy. From her spot behind Koshi, Takane looks up at him in awe. The audience begins to cheer at the sudden love declaration, and Ellie, who had brought Rurika with her, screams loudly in excitement. The rest of the staff behind the play feel the momentum shift and quickly work together to spin the moment into an even more dramatic twist, improvising a narration that sets up a romantic face-off. As the narrator sets the stage, Takane suddenly steps toward Koshi and kisses him. The entire auditorium falls into stunned silence. When the kiss ends, Koshi nearly breaks character, frozen by what just happened, but Takane covers the moment smoothly by inviting him to run away with her. When Seiya calls out after them, reminding Takane about the glass slipper, she coolly responds that he can keep it and takes off with Koshi through the center aisle of the audience. Ellie hugs Rurika with hearts in her eyes, totally smitten by the unexpected turn of events. The narrator, adapting quickly, proclaims that true love conquers all as Takane and Koshi exit the auditorium hand in hand, the audience erupting in applause behind them. To Koshi's surprise, the play turns into a massive hit. Everyone praises the twist ending, saying it gave the performance a unique edge. Their classmates even suggest that Seiya replicate the same surprise twist for the afternoon performance. Meanwhile, several girls ask Takane, asking if the kiss was real. Takane's face turns slightly red, and she laughs nervously, claiming it was simply a necessary move to save the play. She asks them not to talk about it too much, saying it's a little embarrassing. Koshi, not far from the conversation, also blushes slightly, but stays quiet. Later in the evening, while the other students enjoy the rest of the festival, Koshi and Takane find themselves alone in a quiet classroom, watching the activities outside from a window. They talk about how well the play turned out. Takane compliments Koshi for his performance and asks if he was able to make good memories this time. Koshi is distracted from the conversation as the kiss lingers in his mind. He keeps glancing at Takane, wondering whether it truly was just to salvage the scene or if it meant something more. Noticing his gaze, Takane playfully asks what he's thinking about. Seeing his hesitation, she smirks and says that if he can't figure it out, she might just kiss him again so he can think harder. As she leans closer, Koshi braces himself for another kiss, but instead, she flicks him on the forehead. She teases him, saying the flick should wake up his brain as she's ready to do it again if it doesn't work. She then prompts him to answer seriously, threatening, jokingly, that if he answers wrong, she'll rewind the entire day and make sure the play fails instead. Koshi panics, but she quickly reassures him that it's just a joke. She only wants to hear what he really thinks. Koshi answers that he thinks she wants him to continue his duties as her closet. Without a word, Takane activates her ability and Koshi braces for time to rewind back to the start of the cultural festival. But instead, he finds himself right back at the beginning of their conversation. When he turns to Takane, she's staring outside with an unimpressed look. She turns to him and immediately tells him to think harder and threatens to flick his forehead again. Eventually, the moment is cut short when Takane realizes it's time for her to give the closing remarks. She tells Koshi he has to stay in her closet until he figures out the true meaning behind the kiss. With a smile, she instructs him to help her out again. When Koshi finishes his duties, Takane extends her hand toward him, inviting him outside.